All right, welcome back, everyone. Okay, this is going to be Lecture 7 in Unit 1. This is Chapter 7, Institutional Analysis and Political Economy. This was my favorite chapter from the unit so far. This is by Michael McGinnis and Paul Dragos Alagica. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. Yeah, I love this political economy stuff. I'm fascinated with internationalism and how it all plays out. So yeah, I really liked this chapter. I also really liked the idea of just taking a more encompassing view than our normal econometric perspective, right? So good stuff here. Okay, just to start off, most of this work in this chapter review is based on the Bloomington School, Indiana University, and the work of Dr. Ostrom. And his wife, I believe. Okay, and it uses sort of microeconomic theory like we've been doing throughout most of the book, and applies it to sort of public good service, right? A couple important points, though. They say here, it is clear why political economy institutionalism suggests that the existence of multiple agencies interacting and overlapping should not be considered a priori and by definition dysfunctional, right? So some of the sort of statist perspectives, like we talked about in the last chapter, who see the state as this sort of primary and powerful actor and a singular entity, um, they sort of dismiss this idea of different institutions and different agencies and how all of it plays out, right? And they're saying that you be careful about just doing that out of hand, right? Like it should, at minimum, be a discussion. This overlapping and duplication is the result of the fact that different services require different scale for efficient provision, and that the principles of division of labor, cooperation, and exchange function in the public sector true. In traditional bureaucratic theory, duplication of functions is assumed to be wasteful and inefficient, but in a market economy, multiple firms serve the same market. So, another point to be made, right? Like just the idea of fractionalized institutions and fractionalized jurisprudence over policy matters, the idea that that fractionalization is inherently and by definition inefficient and ineffective can also be poked at a little bit, right? Because that is an inherent assumption of private markets, is that competition is good for effectiveness, cost efficiencies, things of this sort, right? And so again, you can't just wipe it away and assume that fractured institutions are necessarily bad, right? So, yeah, again, always arguments to be made on both sides. Sorry, I'm a little stuffy. I caught COVID last week. They further say the public sector includes not only, quote, bureaucratic command structures controlled by chief executives, but also interorganizational arrangements with self regulating tendencies, with efficiency inducing and error correcting behavior. So Ostrom's basically saying, look, sometimes this fractionalization can be a good thing, just like it is in private markets. A little bit of competition goes a long way sometimes, right? And can keep people on their toes and can keep costs down and all kinds of stuff. So they introduced this new approach from the Bloomington School as sort of a new public management approach. And they take what's called a polycentric approach instead of a monocentric approach, which leads us into the next section, section 7.2. Polycentrism basically just connotes the idea that there are many centers of decision making which are formally independent or interdependent upon each other, right? And it's not just this sort of monolithic state making decisions. as some of the sort of statist econometric models will have it be. Polycentrism means a highly federalized system that required all of the following component parts: a rich structure of overlapping jurisdictions with substantial autonomy among jurisdictions, substantial degrees of democratic control within jurisdictions, and subject to an enforceable system of constitutional law. And this leads to the question, is parliamentarism non applicable, right? Because it seems by the definition of Ostrom that this is sort of an idiosyncratic American thing or maybe a federalist thing, right? Maybe not necessarily so specific to the US, but probably not parliamentarism. Because they don't have sort of overlapping jurisdictions or substantial autonomy amongst different jurisdictions. Um, yeah, so interesting. They never really said it out loud, but I think that would be the inference, right? Um, okay. They also lay out 5 necessary features of polycentrism, right? What are the 5 standard pillars? The first, legitimate exercise of coercive capabilities, right? So this is just like the rule of this is basically step one of what even is a state, right? You have to have legitimate control of violence or coercion, right? Um, okay, number 2, you have to have an overarching system of rules. So this is just sort of constitutionalism or something of that sort, right? Number 3, you have to have freedom to enter and exit. So this is like markets. This is one of the basic assumptions of econometrics is that individuals or even corporations or small businesses, whatever it might be, have the freedom to enter and exit the market anytime they want to, right? They can't be coerced into staying open or into buying things, stuff like that. Just like institutions can't be coerced into uh, sort of, I don't know, existing longer than they should or that sort of thing, right? We can shut down an institution anytime we want to, and we do quite often actually. Okay, number 4, the freedom to orderly change the rules, right? So there's some process by which those rules, from rule number 2, the overarching system of rules, can be changed, right? Like they are not monolithic. And then 5, there's some sort of incentive alignment, right? Sort of getting back to that econometric modeling idea that there are incentives and a utility function and all of that stuff. Okay, so those are the 5 basic pillars. All right, section 7.3, co-production consumer producers, right? And they basically just sort of introduce the concept of co-production, right? There are goods by which the user is also a producer in some sense, right? And they give the example of sort of neighborhood security, right? Like you have policing, but just police can't do everything, right? Citizens have to call the police, they have to be willing to testify, there are neighborhood watches, all of these sorts of things also play into it. So the consumer of policing is also a producer of policing in some sense, right? Science is also like this, right? Researchers and the broader science community co-produce, right? I am a researcher and I consume a lot of other research, right? Whether it be from The Economist or Foreign Affairs or from high level journals like American Journal of Political Science or the American Political Science Review or the JOP, the Journal of Politics, right? Those are thought to be the big 3. But I am also a producer of that science, right? Like I don't publish often because I like to focus on the teaching and the mentoring stuff, but I've published. And so in that sense, I'm co-producing this product, right? So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. And citizens, in this sense, are co-producing public goods or market functionality or all kinds of different things too, right? So it's a different way of thinking about the relationship instead of just consumer and producer, or end user of government services, right? We're all part of this culture of governance. And I thought that this actually, for any of you who are interested in this public policy stuff, and this is kind of a really interesting, new and growing and untapped field. They even sort of mention it. They say a notion like co production could be used as a diagnostic tool, and with it, an entire battery of concepts and theories could be developed for institutional design, policy analysis, and assessment, right? And so this might be a really interesting thing to put in the back of your head in case you want like a senior undergraduate project or maybe like a master's thesis, if you're looking to move on, this sort of thing. So always be thinking about that sort of stuff. Okay, section 7.4, the IAD framework. IAD stands for Institutional Analysis and Development. Excuse me. And this is sort of what they're trying to get us to think about throughout this entire sort of review of this chapter. It's like, look, there are other ways to think about this. We want to introduce this idea of co-production, and then it all builds to this IAD, right, from the Bloomington School. And so there are some component parts of the IAD, right? The first is that um, they focus on direct attention to the rules of the game as they are, not as they're written, right? Because we know that they don't always exactly follow the rules despite there being laws on paper, right? Um, and we're not just talking about people who like rob convenience stores or whatever. Like obviously there are those, right? But even when it comes to the politicians or the elites who write the actual laws themselves are often not following the constitutional rules put in place, right? About writing rules. And so, yeah, they're saying like let's be thoughtful about that. If I was your political advisor, I would say like let's know what the rules on paper are, but let's also be thoughtful about how this game actually plays out, right? Okay. Number two, the underlying biophysical nature of the good under consideration in terms of being either, right, one of these subtypes. Is it a private good? Is it a public good? Is it one of those toll or club goods that they mentioned where you have to be sort of part of this group to get benefits or whatever it might be? Or is it a common pool resource like we were talking about, like a fishery or something like that, or a public park or an interstate? All common pool resources, right? Okay, and number three, the most relevant attributes of community, especially ambient levels of trust and shared norms of reciprocity. So this is where that co-production piece comes in, right? Um, we need to understand what the communal context looks like. What, right? What is the local culture, political culture, actual culture? Thought culture, all of these sorts of things, right? And some of this goes back to like Daniel Elazar's thoughts on like the tripartite political culture system in America, right? Like the traditionalistic and the moralistic, and then what was the other one, like idealistic or something like that up in the Northeast. But it gets to that idea that like there is something to culture that maybe we can't even operationalize, right? Because this is a difficult part of the culture argument in science, is like, how do we test that, right? How do we build a system that can say, okay, here is how I could disprove that numerically in some sense? And that's hard to do with culture, right? But they are saying, like, this is important and we need to at least, like, consider it. Okay. They also, in this IAD framework, they build out a little bit of a different level of analysis system, right? We've talked about level of analysis in here, micro, meso, macro. Um, this is a little bit different. They say the first is operational level, right? And this is about policy implementation. Um, the second is collective level decision making and choices, right? Involving determination of which strategies, norms, rules are or should be available to actors fulfilling the role that's been defined by the political population we are talking about, right? Um, and then the third is constitutional level choices, right? Who is actually empowered through jurisprudence to participate in the making of these collective or operational decisions, right? So weird and different way of looking at the analysis itself. Um, okay, yeah, I think that's it. I'm going to post the questions when I post this. Chapter 8 kind of blew my mind a little bit. That is in no way my expertise, and I'm going to give you my opinions on some of it. But I want to do a little bit more preparation on chapter 8, just so that I can be sure I'm telling you the right thing. Um, but I'm an institutionalist and an economist, and not a uh, semantics expert or whatever it might be. Like I can't even really get to the core of some of what they're even trying to say here. So no, that I'm not going to test you on it. But if this is your stuff, if you're into like the psychology, sociology stuff, I'm gonna put it out there for you. But I want to get the questions up, and I want to dig in a little bit more before I put my words out there, right? Okay, so thank you for that. And I hope you appreciate my honesty about like I don't know this. Okay, it's my I never saw this before in grad school or anything, right? We were institutionalists. So, okay, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Have a great day.